Before we begin, please note that this content is for educational and informational purposes only. It is not intended to be a substitute for professional medical advice, diagnosis, or treatment. Always seek the advice of your physician or other qualified health provider with any questions you may have regarding a medical condition. Welcome to this teaching session on hypocalcemia in adults. This is a comprehensive review designed for internal medicine residents at all levels of training. We will cover the key concepts you need for clinical practice, from pathophysiology to diagnosis to management. Let us get started. Let us begin with a clinical scenario. A 52-year-old woman presents to the emergency department 24 hours after undergoing a total thyroidectomy. She is complaining of perioral numbness, tingling in her fingertips, and muscle cramps. On exam, she has a positive Trousseau sign and a positive Chvostek sign. Her labs show a total calcium of 6.8 milligrams per deciliter and an ionized calcium of 0.85 millimoles per liter. Her magnesium is 1.6 milligrams per deciliter, and her phosphorus is 5.2 milligrams per deciliter. Critically, her parathyroid hormone is low at 8 picograms per milliliter. Her electrocardiogram shows a prolonged QT interval. What is the diagnosis and management? Keep this case in mind. By the end of this lecture, you should be able to do 4 things. First, define hypocalcemia and distinguish true from pseudohypocalcemia. Second, identify etiologies using a parathyroid hormone-based framework. Third, recognize clinical manifestations across neuromuscular, cardiac, and neuropsychiatric systems. And fourth, apply a stepwise treatment approach. What exactly is hypocalcemia? It is defined as a total serum calcium below 8.5 milligrams per deciliter, but the gold standard is an ionized calcium below 1.16 millimoles per liter. We categorize severity into mild and severe. Mild hypocalcemia is a total calcium between 7.5 and 8.5, or an ionized calcium between 0.8 and 1.16 millimoles per liter, and is often asymptomatic. Severe hypocalcemia is a total calcium below 7.5, or an ionized calcium of 0.8 millimoles per liter or less, and can present with tetany, seizures, or arrhythmias. Remember, the rate of decline matters as much as the absolute level. A rapid drop to 7.5 is often more symptomatic than a chronic level of 7.0. A critical clinical pearl. Low albumin causes pseudohypocalcemia, where total calcium is low but ionized calcium is normal. This does not require treatment. The correction formula is inaccurate, so always check ionized calcium. Before we dive into causes, let us review calcium homeostasis. Parathyroid hormone increases bone resorption, renal calcium reabsorption, and calcitriol production. Vitamin D is converted to calcitriol in the kidney, which increases intestinal calcium absorption. Key regulators include the calcium sensing receptor and FGF23. FGF23 inhibits calcitriol production and promotes phosphate excretion. It is why phosphate and vitamin D metabolism are so tightly linked in chronic kidney disease. Remember that about 50% of serum calcium is ionized and active, 40 to 45% is bound to albumin, and 10% is complexed. The most common cause of hypoparathyroidism is surgical, occurring after thyroidectomy or parathyroidectomy. Autoimmune causes can be isolated or part of polyglandular autoimmune syndrome type 1. This is the classic triad of mucocutaneous candidiasis, adrenal insufficiency, and hypoparathyroidism, a favorite on boards and in clinical practice. Hypomagnesemia is critical. It causes a dual problem by suppressing parathyroid hormone secretion and causing end organ resistance. The hypocalcemia is refractory until magnesium is corrected. Genetic causes include DiGeorge syndrome and calcium-sensing receptor mutations. Rare infiltrative causes include hemochromatosis and Wilson disease. Now let us look at causes where parathyroid hormone is appropriately elevated. Vitamin D deficiency is common due to decreased intake, malabsorption, or lack of sun exposure. Chronic kidney disease is the most common cause in hospitalized patients due to decreased calcitriol and hyperphosphatemia. Pseudohyparathyroidism is end organ resistance to parathyroid hormone. In acute pancreatitis, calcium precipitates with free fatty acids released during fat necrosis. This is also why hypocalcemia serves as a marker of disease severity. Medications are important causes, including proton pump inhibitors, bisphosphonates, denosumab, loop diuretics, foscarnet, and citrate blood products. Finally, hyperphosphatemia from tumor lysis syndrome or rhabdomyolysis can precipitate calcium. Clinical manifestations span multiple systems. Neuromuscular signs include paresthesias, carpopedal spasm, Trousseau sign, and Chvostek sign. Note that Chvostek sign has a 10 to 25% false positive rate. Laryngospasm and bronchospasm can also occur and are life-threatening. Cardiovascularly, look for a prolonged QT interval which can lead to life-threatening torsades de pointes, as well as decreased contractility and hypotension. Neuropsychiatric manifestations include fatigue, anxiety, depression, confusion, seizures, and basal ganglia calcification. Other manifestations can include cataracts and dental abnormalities. And remember, rate of decline matters as much as the absolute level. A rapid fall is always more dangerous. Here is your diagnostic algorithm. Step 1. Confirm hypocalcemia with ionized calcium. Step 2. Check intact parathyroid hormone. This is your branch point. If parathyroid hormone is low or normal, you are dealing with hypoparathyroidism, such as surgical, autoimmune, or genetic causes or hypomagnesemia. If parathyroid hormone is elevated, check vitamin D, phosphate, creatinine, and magnesium. This branch includes vitamin D deficiency, chronic kidney disease, pseudohyperthyroidism, pancreatitis, medications, and hyperphosphatemia. Your essential laboratory workup should include ionized calcium to confirm true hypocalcemia, albumin to interpret total calcium, intact parathyroid hormone as your branch point, and magnesium, which must be checked in all cases. Also check phosphate to help narrow the etiology. Elevated phosphate points toward chronic kidney disease or hypoparathyroidism, while low phosphate points toward vitamin D deficiency, a simple but powerful differentiator. Check 25-hydroxyvitamin D to assess vitamin D status, creatinine to evaluate renal function, and an electrocardiogram for cardiac safety and to check for a prolonged QT interval. For severe and symptomatic hypocalcemia, indications for intravenous calcium include carpopedal spasm, laryngospasm, seizures, prolonged QT, or an ionized calcium of 0.8 millimoles per liter or less. Step 1 is an intravenous calcium gluconate bolus. We prefer gluconate over chloride. While chloride delivers more elemental calcium, it requires central venous access due to the risk of tissue necrosis with extravasation, whereas gluconate can be given peripherally. Step 2 is a continuous intravenous calcium drip. Step 3 is critical. Correct magnesium, as hypocalcemia will not correct until magnesium is replete. Step 4. Check and correct potassium. Step 5. Transition to oral therapy. Safety warning. Do not give intravenous calcium in the same line as bicarbonate, phosphate, or ceftriaxone. For mild and chronic hypocalcemia, use oral calcium supplementation with elemental calcium in divided doses. Calcium carbonate requires gastric acid, so take it with food. Calcium citrate is preferred if the patient is on a proton pump inhibitor. For vitamin D therapy, use high-dose repletion for deficiency and calcitriol for hypoparathyroidism and chronic kidney disease. We use calcitriol, the active form, because without parathyroid hormone, the kidney cannot convert standard vitamin D into its active metabolite. The activation step is missing, so we bypass it entirely. Your target calcium is the low normal range, approximately 8.0 to 8.5 milligrams per deciliter, to avoid hypercalciuria. And remember, always check and correct magnesium in every case. In special clinical scenarios, post-thyroidectomy or parathyroidectomy patients can develop hungry bone syndrome, causing severe, prolonged hypocalcemia. Risk factors include a preoperative parathyroid hormone over 1,000 and alkaline phosphatase over 150 to 300. These patients need high-dose calcium and calcitriol, and the replacement burden can be extraordinary, lasting weeks to months, which is why early recognition and endocrinology involvement matter. In chronic kidney disease and dialysis, intravenous calcium is not first line for asymptomatic patients. Focus on correcting hyperphosphatemia and low calcitriol. During massive transfusion, citrate chelates ionized calcium, so monitor and replete. For patients on digoxin, intravenous calcium enhances cardiotoxicity and can cause fatal arrhythmias. Give it slowly with continuous monitoring. Note that recent retrospective data suggests this risk may be lower than historically thought, but caution remains the standard. Here are your take-home points. 1. Always confirm with ionized calcium. The albumin correction formula is only about 60% accurate, not good enough to make treatment decisions on. 2. Parathyroid hormone is your first branch point. 3. Check magnesium in every case. 4. For severe or symptomatic cases, use an intravenous calcium gluconate bolus and drip. 5. For chronic cases, use oral calcium and vitamin D, targeting the low normal range. Resolving our vignette. The patient has post-thyroidectomy hypoparathyroidism. We will give an intravenous calcium gluconate bolus and drip, start calcitriol, check and correct magnesium, and eventually transition to oral calcium and calcitriol. Thank you for watching. This lecture summarized key concepts from current guidelines and evidence. Please read the full recommendations. Perform your own analysis and apply clinical judgment to each patient. Stay curious. Keep learning. Your patients depend on it.